Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is supported by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Telecommunications Access Minnesota, and Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and online at nisswatax.com.
I've had the opportunity to watch the national news on another network, not PBS. Once in a while I watch another network. And CBS has been interviewing chief executive officers from some of the leading companies around the country and asking them, if you had a chance to talk to Congress, what would you be telling them to do to help our economy? And with no exceptions, one of the things they've said is invest in education and keep investing in education. And the other thing that they've all brought up, I think that was really interesting, and that is keep investing in research and development. That's how our country is going to move ahead and solve problems and stay competitive in this world. And tonight we have a project to talk about that is a research and development project that's very unique. It's occurring here in Brainerd, and I think you're going to find this pretty interesting. My guest this evening on my right is Peter Nelson, who is a principal with Hidden Fuels, and Hidden Fuels is a private company, so this is a public-private partnership. To his right is Scott Sherland, who is the technical supervisor for the Brainerd Public Utilities. And to his right is Earl Willett, who is the director for Buildings and Grounds for the Brainerd Public School District. And so the two people to Peter's right are the public part of this discussion. Peter is the private sector part. And maybe we could just talk a little bit about your organizations before we get into your particular project. But Peter, tell us, what is Hidden Fuels?
Well, Hidden Fuels was formed about 4 years ago by myself and two others. And the whole purpose of the company is to investigate and analyze alternative sources of energy, thus the name Hidden Fuels. We're really looking for energy sources that are kind of untapped at this time.
And Scott, maybe you could tell us, what does the Brainerd Public Utilities cover? What are the things you do there?
Brainerd Public Utilities has been providing municipal services to the city of Brainerd for over 100 years, and that includes electric, water, and wastewater treatment utilities to the local residents.
And Earl, I know you have a technical background, and you have been involved in some very unique projects within the Brainerd School District. Could you just briefly tell us a few of the things that you've done that are pretty unique?
Yeah, about 7 or 8 years ago, we started modernizing some of our schools' HVAC and energy systems, and over that period of time, we've been trying to stay ahead of the curve in technology as far as energy conservation in the district and environment for the students. So basically, we started out at Nisswa School with a project, and it worked into some of the other elementary schools, and our finish was the forestry project, which is probably our most energy efficient and most advanced school.
This would be probably more of the research than the development side of my introduction, because you folks are involved in research. And it is sort of a poopy project in a way, if we can say that. Tell us what you're doing. Somebody tell us, get this started. What is it that you're doing that's so unique?
Well, the whole project is, the crux of the project at this phase is to identify where in the city wastewater system there is energy that can be tapped. And in this case, we're talking about thermal energy, either heating or cooling. And so we know that with all of the wastewater flow, that there is certainly energy, not just in the movement, but also in the ability to extract heat or cool from that. And but no one knows how much. And so the project is really to look at how much flow there is and also what temperature the flow is, because you have to have both of those in order to understand how much energy is available.
So the points of use that we're talking about are sinks, any kind of a sink, a bathroom sink, a commercial building, the hot water that's coming out of there. You're looking at septic systems, the toilets, the flush,
yes,
all of that stuff that goes into the wastewater management process.
Yes.
And you have a term for it, because you have a way of measuring the flow. It's Scada?
Scada, which stands for System Control and Data Acquisition. And it's just a way to monitor and control remote equipment from our facility. And in this case, we're monitoring pump starts and stops to help quantify the flow. And then we've also inserted some temperature sensors to tell us what the thermal advantage is at some of these points around the system.
So when this project started, how was it funded? And then maybe we could just talk real briefly about how you three got together to make this work, because you all had to go through a higher form of authority to get approval for doing that. But how was it funded?
Well, we approached the city. We had started thinking about this concept really on a residential level. If you can think of all of the classic story is the septic tank that snow melts on. Well, certainly there's heat energy in there. Well, starting with that, if you scale it up to a citywide kind of process, imagine how much energy there could be in that. Well, no one really knew how much energy there could be in that. But when we talked to the city about this project, we decided that maybe this could be a joint project. And in our due diligence, looking around the country, we couldn't really find any municipalities that were really capturing energy in this way. So the Brainerd Public Utilities, City of Brainerd, the school district, and Hidden Fuels submitted a project to the Energy Security Department at the state of Minnesota, and describing what this project that we wanted to pursue. And it was really great affirmation for us when the state came back and gave us a grant to actually do this study, because by virtue of the state doing their own due diligence, if they would have determined that this was common knowledge or common practice in some way, they wouldn't fund the research for it. But because they funded the research for it, it really is confirmation for us that we're really out on the leading edge of capturing a new source of energy.
It's interesting that you take cities like New York or Los Angeles, none of those cities are involved in a project like this. It would be more practical to do it on a scale that you're doing it, as opposed to going into those larger cities and trying to get arms around doing something like that.
Well, kind of the run before you walk principle, or walk before you run principle.
What would be in it for your organization? What's in it for the school district? Why would the school district want to get involved in this project?
Well, it's another source of energy, less costly source of energy. We look at the natural gas trends over the last number of years, and right now we're in an anomaly. Natural gas was $14 a decatherm a number of years ago. And as the economy took its hit, of course, the requirement for energy was reduced and the cost of energy has gone down. But that's not going to last. As our economy gains ground and we start moving forward, there will be more and more energy use, and that cost of energy, that natural gas, will be more and more costly, more expensive. So for us to be looking at this now, it's really being proactive to looking ahead and finding ways to heat our buildings and supply energy to our schools that's in a more cost-effective and an economical, and not only that, an environmentally friendly and in a very good way.
And I would guess, Scott, that you've already had a pretty good idea about volume that's traveling through your system.
Yeah, total volume.
But not the temperature.
Yeah, and not necessarily volume distributed throughout the city. I mean, we obviously know what the volume is at the wastewater treatment plant because we're treating all of it, but to quantify how much energy is available at each one of these locations, nobody's really done that. So.
And I'm just guessing, but you're probably underground enough that the temperature is pretty constant down there?
Yep.
Winter, spring, summer, and fall, I would guess?
Typically, sewer pipes are 8 to 12 feet below ground, so, and the ground temperature down there is more like 45 degrees.
So how many areas are you putting sensors in to start measuring this? How big is your project?
Do we have 16 temperature
sensors? Right now we have 16 locations. But there is temperature variance in there.
Yep.
We've seen some locations even as high as 80 degrees. underground.
Really?
Yeah, and we've seen other locations drop down to the low 40s. So it's important to note that this is a year-long project because we need to identify if there are seasonal changes. Certainly because of the change in population, you would see a change in the flow rate, but we also need to know, are there seasonal influences for the temperature? So, and until you know that, you can't really design a system to take advantage of what energy is there.
In your grant or in your thinking, when you've identified your energy across the Brainerd area, what do you see as the next step? What's the next logical step for your project?
There really needs to be a matching process because this part of the project is to go through and we will quantify the amount of energy that's available. But then you need to go through a matching process because the places that can use the energy may not be next to the places that have the energy.
So you say matching, you mean the source to the end use?
To the end use, right. And so this is where the schools and districts' involvement has been really good because those are large energy users, but you could have county buildings, you could have other city buildings, you could have industry, all sorts of different places, or apartment buildings, you know, that demand a lot of heat energy, but then the question is, are they actually close to the source?
And I know you've got an idea about how much energy how many homes could be supplied by the energy in this system. You want to just talk about that briefly?
Yeah, you know, there's one location we've been sampling. It's on East River Road in Brainerd, right close to the high school. And at that East River Road location, there's a fairly significant flow going through there. And in the evaluation that we've done, we've monitored both of the temperature and the flow rate. And from an engineering standpoint, you try to determine how many BTUs are available. And in that analysis, we can look at the amount of energy that's available to be captured.
And you said something like 400 homes it could potentially maybe heat.
Yeah, there's
400 homes in the Brainerd area if you could capture all of it.
There's a chart that it shows this kind of concept. And what happens
that's what we're looking at here?
That's what you're looking at here. And in this, the red line and the blue line, one represents about 1 million BTUs per hour and the other is about 3 million BTUs per hour. But it's a good example of the relationship between knowing the temperature and the flow rate. So from that chart you can see on the bottom is gallons per minute and on the vertical scale is the temperature. And so by looking at the gallons per minute, if the flow rate is low, which we found typically the lowest flow rate at that location is about 6 a.m., you need to have many more degrees of heat available. If you have a much higher flow rate, which typically occurs closer to late in the afternoon, then you have a much higher flow rate and you don't need nearly as many degrees change in order to extract the same amount of heat. And so in this analysis that we've done so far, we've determined that there's enough energy to heat the equivalent of about 400 homes in the city of Brainerd.
Wow, that's a substantial amount.
It's a significant amount of energy.
It really is.
Yes. Now, I have to be clear, we don't think at this point it's practical to heat homes, but from an equivalent energy standpoint, it's a lot of heat.
Well, the next question probably most people would have is, okay, you found this energy source. How do you convert it into a usable fashion? What's that process going to entail?
That actually is kind of the next phase for this project. And the first phase that we're in is to determine how much energy is there. And the next phase would be to really develop the tools to extract the energy. At this point, we can make recommendations, and we think we can use some geothermal concepts that are well accepted. But there will be some
Could you give any couple examples of what you mean?
by geothermal.
Yeah.
Well, geothermal is, you hear about geothermal heat pumps. People are extracting water out of wells or putting loops in the ground. And the whole concept there is to be able to extract the heat from those sources and make use of it in a home, or vice versa, use it for cooling.
And it doesn't have to be 80 degrees to 80 degrees, does it? I mean, in that process, water can give off very comfortable heat, even though the water temperature.
Well, the water,
low.
yes, sure. Water temperature can be 55 degrees, and you can extract heat out of it.
Right.
It's a good point, because there's a limitation to this concept that we're talking about. For example, if the wastewater stream is at 40 degrees, you have very few degrees, and you can extract from that before you're approaching freezing. So there are some limitations in applying this, and thus that's why we need an entire year study to be able to see the seasonality of the flows and temperatures.
Scott, for city managers or people who might be watching us in other communities, are there similarities between the smaller communities in Brainerd in terms of how they collect the wastewater and how they store it?
Sure, yeah.
So it could be applicable to a smaller community?
Nationwide.
Nationwide.
Worldwide, really.
Wow.
We're all using the same sewer pipe technology and lift stations and collection systems, maybe the end process of treating, but that's not really part of this, the way we're trying to extract heat. So all the piping is the same. So I think it would work well for even the very small communities.
Earl, it seems like a school district would be a natural end user because of your
sustainable energy source. That's a very exciting piece of this. It's a sustainable energy source. We are moving toward heating systems that will be more easily, this would be more easily applied to. Where we used to make steam to heat the buildings, we're moving more toward hydronic or hot water systems, which run at a lower temperature. And this is much more easy to phase in. It's so much easier to phase this in to a low temperature hydronic system than, for instance, a steam operated system. So yeah, this is technology that is kind of coming into vogue at the same time we are making our changes to lower temperature ways to heat the buildings, and it's a really good synergistic application from that standpoint.
As an aside, it's kind of interesting that normally this time of the year we start seeing fuel prices going down, fuel oil prices going down, and they're not. And we've been in a slow economy for certain, but I saw that the gas went up to $4 on the East Coast here a couple of days ago. So this sort of research to me just makes sense to deal with our long-term issues. And when you look at the application of how many places could use this information once you figure out what you need to figure out. Are you actually funded for the next phase of this yet, or do you have to go back and knock on doors again once you've got all your research laid out?
We're not funded for the phase after this.
So that would be another step that you have to
Yes.
go and knock on doors. And the Department of Energy Security, is that part of Homeland Security? I'm not that familiar with what that is.
No, it's part of DEED.
Oh, it's part of DEED,
Yeah.
Department of Energy and Economic Development?
Yes.
Okay.
Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Oh, okay.
And the grant actually flowed through the federal government, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and some of that money flowed to the states, and they doled it out to grant applicants like ourselves. So.
You know, this is probably not a fair question, but how would you ever determine the price of this energy once you started plugging it into a building?
Well, that's really a good question. There's been some debate about who owns the energy.
Who flushing those toilets
Yeah,
in Brainerd?
Because there's a cost of the install, but somebody's going to get some benefit there, and so that's a undecided question.
That really, I guess, don't give me too much credit for that question, but I never thought of that. Everybody's contributing to that, aren't they, in the city?
Yeah, and then who owns it?
And who owns it after the flush?
And what's the cost of the technology to do the conversion?
And
Yeah.
we don't know the answers to those questions yet. I'm
not
taking
yet.
it. So you're really, from a legalistic point of view, you're also paving new ground there, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
And different states may have different ways of looking at that.
And there may be different legislatures that think of it in many different ways, and certainly there's some value there, and how those economics get sorted out, we are uncertain.
Scott, right now, when you run the wastewater treatments, I mean, you collect the wastewater and you run it into a treatment facility, what happens to it next?
Well, we just switched processes with our new water treatment or wastewater treatment plant. So the new process is they put it in a giant container, and they add air to it, and it ferments or eats itself basically, and kills all the bacteria, and then we filter that, and it goes out to the river, and
to the Mississippi River
yep,
in this case?
And it's clean water that's going into the Mississippi River, but it's also has a lot of water temperature to it. So there's a lot of BTUs, wasted BTUs, that are going into the river now, where it'd be nice if we were capturing those on the front end, because we don't necessarily need them on the tail end of the process.
So that's another whole twist to this, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
just
Yes.
the end process and recovering some of that energy too. Wow, that's amazing.
I think, Ray, it's there's an awful lot of attention that's given to energy that goes into a structure, but not many people really have looked at what is coming out. How do you recapture what's coming back out of a facility, whether it's a home or whether it's a large commercial building? So that's kind of the area that we thought was been kind of neglected. And so that's really the area that this project is focused on. All that stuff that we're just getting rid of for somebody else to deal with, there's real value there.
And I know a lot of places are looking at garbage in the same light, to figure out a way to reuse that. I think the Europeans have probably been ahead of America over the years in figuring out ways to utilize their waste. But this is really, really interesting. If someone in Windham or Winona wanted to find out more about this project, who should they contact if they wanted to get the details of what you're working on right now?
They can contact Hidden Fuels through our website.
So is that hiddenfuels.com?
Yes, Hidden Fuels, HIDDENFUELS.com.
Okay, and then you would be able to help them a little bit from that perspective. Well, what do you see coming down the future?
We've done a lot of thought about that, and it was interesting talking with Earl one day. He said, I've had a revelation here. And he was standing at the back of the high school, and he said, imagine this, if we could run this energy loop. And so from a futuristic kind of standpoint, Earl described this energy loop. I think we've got a slide that shows that. But Earl, this is your idea. You should explain it.
There it is.
Well, basically, we have an elevation differential from, for instance, at the high rises to the football field of about 35 or 40 feet. And the sewer line presently runs down the green line. Now, we thought, this is a concept. If we could divert that sewer line along the base of the sports complex at the high school, we would make this available to a lot of different facilities. Those facilities that could include anything that's along that loop. Could be the county building, the courthouse, the library, the high school, for instance. And the fact that we have a natural elevation there, we'd have a natural flow, and that effluent then just could tumble down and possibly through means we don't know about yet to extract that heat and supply that heat to the buildings along that path. And as much as we initially thought about that, this is going to probably take a lot of contact, a lot of whatever heat recovery device we use, it's going to take a lot of them to get this energy out. So thinking along those lines, probably one user wouldn't be the benefit. It would be a benefit to a number of users along that loop. So it would be a win-win for all of those folks that lived along that loop.
So if you had the courthouse, the library, the jail maybe, there's a lot of buildings in that particular area.
There's a lot of buildings along there, and then if if each one of those could benefit from an energy extraction, that would be a win-win for Brainerd for sure.
Wow. Wow, that's really amazing. And you said you could get it would flow naturally, so it wouldn't take any more fresh energy to get it down.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to pump it. We could actually probably gravity flow it down there and extract as we go. And that's just a concept,
right.
And a lot more has to be put into this. But it was just an interesting analogy that there is an opportunity there just from the topography that we have there where that sewer line runs.
You know, we hear about wind energy and solar energy. This has got to rank right up there as with maybe even more unique than either of those. To me it does, because we have a lot of drawbacks from all of those, you know, the wind and the solar, and this certainly has a lot of obstacles to overcome. I'm not suggesting it doesn't.
Potentially available 24/7 where the other two aren't.
Right, you don't need the sun and you don't need the wind blowing all the time. It's as long as people keep doing their job, flushing the toilet, turning on the faucets, you got it. Well, you were going to say something, Pete?
I was going to say, I'm sure that there are complications that we haven't anticipated. But at this point, when we think about what hurdles there are, we think that most of them are going to be mechanical engineering kinds of problems. So we're optimistic that we think that those will be pretty solvable.
Wow. Well, it's a fascinating project. Again, we're calling it energy, waste to energy. It involves Hidden Fuels, private company, the Brainerd Public Utilities, and the Brainerd School District, a public-private partnership that's very, very unique. And if you need to have more information about it, contact hiddenfuels.com, and Pete can give you some more information about that. Maybe we'll have you guys back here at the end of your project and see how the research, what it's actually showing.
Well, we'd be glad to do that.
And what your next step might be. Well, that'd be great. Thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it very much. You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.